Generally speaking, it's a pretty common practice to fill your 8 or 16-bit game with 8 or 16-bit sounds. When this was simply a product of limitation, it made sense. But these days, you'd be doing yourself a disservice by sticking to this aesthetic. It's right there in the description after all, a limitation. Don't get me wrong, chiptune designs are a ton of fun, and the way the designers worked within the limitations were incredible, but now it's just not quite enough. Not with all of the options available with modern tech. Forager is a fantastic example of putting this to practice. It really does it the right way. From the sound of chopping down a tree, all the way to the level up sound. Oof, that sounds so good. I think that anyone who plays Forager would honestly love the soundscape of it. And it wouldn't surprise me if just hearing those sounds on their own makes you want to pick the game up for yourself. It says a lot about the power of sound design. Once you get some solid feedback sounds, and you feel rewarded by the audio, it makes you crave that feeling again. It also does so much for building the world of the game, from hearing every gear and the mechanics of a gun, to the way an engine speaks of unrestrained sci-fi. Just by adding 1 or 2 synthetic elements. The understanding of the world provided through the sound changes the context of the gameplay and art in front of you. That being said, this world building is exactly where I feel Forager falls surprisingly short. Forager just lacks variety in the sound design. Listen to the difference between breaking a rock and breaking a rock with gold in it. They're identical, when you could simply add individual elements to each sound, making them uniquely their own. Maybe add a sparkly sound effect to the gold being mined. Or for iron, add a more metallic sound while the rock is a bit more dull. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. Plenty of games have sounds that are the same as other sounds. But the struggle comes with how much a Forager hinges on repetitive actions. Breaking rocks, mining coal, chopping trees, collecting minerals, gathering resources to create more structures. Not just for making money, but also expanding land, as well as discovering new abilities, expanding land even further, being more productive, making more money, collecting more resources, expanding land even further. Rinse and repeat until you reach max level. There are overall short-term and long-term goals for expanding land and exploring as much as you can, but in the immediate short-term, you are spending a lot of time collecting resources, which does get repetitive. With this being the case, making sure that you diversify your sound design as much as possible is extremely important. When you're going to be hearing a lot of the same sounds over and over again, it's crucial to have different sounds for each type of rock being mined, tree being chopped, enemy being attacked, and plant being uprooted. This just adds more depth to what the player listens to. And if we had this sort of variety, it would counterbalance the repetitive nature of the gameplay, for a little while at least. As you progress through the game and get more land, you get to automate collecting resources with mining rods, which opens the game up the way only an industrial revolution can. So you have hundreds of resources being collected every minute, using the power of robotic workforce, bringing in even more money to spend on expanding land. And now you get to watch your empire spring up like so many flowers now trampled by the success of industrial might. Huzzah, I say, brothers, go forth to Valhalla, shredding the land under your feet for the glory of the nation across all realms. So the repetition in gameplay is no longer an issue after a certain point. But the repetition in sounds? You see this square of land that I'm on? This spreads out in a 7x7 grid. That's 49 different blocks of land that you can purchase. Why don't we listen to what happens when we have mining rods covering the entire 49 block span? You may have noticed that there is no 3D panning or attenuation in Forager. This means that every single sound that plays on the map will be heard no matter where you are. Most games should have some sort of sound drop-off distance to help convey information correctly to the player through the audio, and to help clean up the mix of the game. It's easy to forget that sound is additive. In something like a painting, you create negative space by adding more of a certain color to the right spot. But with audio, if you add more of it, you don't create negative space, you just get more audio. And then on top of this, because information needs to be portrayed clearly to a player to know what's happening on the screen, having more sounds play just clutter up the direction for the player. Because the game has no 3D panning or attenuation, you can hear everything and you are audibly receiving all of this information all of the time. So if we have too many mining rods, then it can get really loud and really mess up the mix of our audio. On its own, the fact that audio is additive can be very helpful in delivering information. When the volume from these mining rods collecting sounds get louder, we know that more resources are being collected. Here's what it sounds like with one mining rod. Here's what it sounds like when we have 5 mining rods. Here's 10. And here's about 15 or 20 of them. And this is when you double their production. In the midst of gameplay, this actually is a really nice rewarding feedback sound effect. Simply raising the volume of an ongoing sound can do wonders to grab a player's attention towards something that's good for the player in the game. But the greater downside to this is if the audio playing is too constant, like we hear from the mining rods, it can drown out the other audio. The fact that Forager has a feedback sound constantly happening is a great feature. It was just executed poorly. It was overwhelming to have all of those sounds playing at once. This could have been fixed by having a voice count cap on each audio file that would play. You can also hear the sound stack when attacking a large horde of enemies. Here's one enemy. And here's a horde. I thought it would be interesting to dive a little deeper and actually show how this can be rectified in integration with Fmod. Now I know that Forager was made using GameMaker, but since my GameMaker chops need a little work, I'm going to use Fmod and Unity for this demonstration. With Fmod, we can choose if a game object acts as 2D or 3D, which implies whether or not it will have any attenuation or panning. I've created 3 unique game objects in the scene to play on a loop, much like Forager does when you have a mining rod. This first example has the 2D sounds, in a similar format to what Forager has. No matter where I move the camera, we will always hear these sounds. Now this is what it sounds like with 3D sounds. You can see that there is a fall off distance for each unique sound. So we're halfway there with what we're trying to fix. But we also want to layer a 2D sound to still give proper feedback to the player. So now we still get to hear the sounds in action when we are in proximity to them. And when we are far away, we still get the feedback sounds for the collection. The last thing we need to fix is the additive audio. Well, fortunately, in Fmod, we have this nice little feature on each event called max instances. If every sound is executed in a game in the form of an instance, then we can control how many of these instances show up at once, which means that we don't get overwhelmed with additive audio. The sound in Forager really is impressive. The sounds stand strong on their own, as well as meshing together in an incredibly satisfying experience, especially that level up sound. So good. It really only fell short due to some stereo mixing and attenuation decisions. I'm unsure how the sound engine in GameMaker looks, but I'm sure there can be something figured out to help fix these issues. Hopfrog, if you're listening, don't hesitate to reach out on Twitter if you're serious about fixing this. We at Blipsounds would love to see how we could help. Anyways, I hope this video was helpful for you all. If you all like this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment if you find our videos helpful. We love the feedback. Anyway, I hope to see you there, and thank you for watching.